WTOP's American Nightmare podcast series, Unknown Subject, is brought to you by Simply Safe. Simply Safe Home Security is different. They keep you safe and help you save. Get 40% off Simply Safe's advanced security system, because at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is here.
Roger that.
And so is Mountain Dew.
Roger that.
Unlock in-game rewards like only Dew can.
Wait, what rewards?
A Dew Operator skin.
Man, I love Operator skins.
Dual double XP.
Dual double XP? Dual double XP.
Even Call of Duty points.
You're kidding me. Call of Duty points? This is incredible. I can't believe it.
Soldier, get a hold of yourself.
Oh. Roger that.
Look for specially marked packaging and visit MountainDewGaming.com for details and restrictions. Open to U.S. residents 17+. Call of Duty points available only on 12 and 24 packs. Ends 3/28/23.
This episode of WTOP's American Nightmare series, Unknown Subject, is brought to you by Simply Safe.
We are recording.
At the beginning of the last episode, I told you about what happened down in Conway, South Carolina, on the day detectives showed up to question Giles Warrick, the man they suspected of being the Potomac River rapist. As you know, that day was critical. Warrick agreed to let detectives swab his cheek for DNA, which finally linked him to Christine's killing and the rapes of several other women years before that. But in the time I've been working on this podcast, I learned a lot more about what happened that day, down to exactly what Warrick told police when they showed up at his door. As they got out of the car that morning, the detectives turned on a tape recorder. That's what you're listening to now.
Yeah,
How you doing, sir?
Hey, Mr. Warrick.
Yes.
How you doing? I'm Detective Giles Warrick County Police. Detective DePoy, Detective Williams.
How you doing, sir?
How are you?
They'd like to speak with you.
Is it
mind stepping out?
Is it possible to find somewhere to sit down and talk for a minute and explain what's going on?
Sure.
Do you mind? Come on in. Thanks.
Please.
Giles Warrick is set to go on trial later this year. As the case has gotten closer to picking a jury, this first conversation with Warrick is the subject of an intense argument between the defense and prosecutors. Warrick's lawyer is a man named Stephen Mercer. I'll tell you more about him later. Mercer argued the evidence collected by the detectives that day, that is, the DNA from a buccal swab, should be thrown out because the investigators, D.C. Police Detective Todd Williams and Montgomery County Police Detective Allison DePoy, used a ruse to enter the house, and that Warrick felt he didn't really have a choice whether or not to give up his DNA. Now, prosecutors obviously saw things differently. They said there's no doubt Warrick consented to the swab of his cheek, and that Warrick was not coerced into giving up his DNA. The detectives were cordial and calm. In September of 2022, during a motions hearing in D.C. Superior Court, prosecutors played the interview so the judge could hear exactly what was said. Since it was introduced as evidence, Judge Milton Lee agreed to release it to me. And now you can hear the conversation as well.
So we're down here. We've got Detective Scales here with Horry County. We're from Montgomery County, Maryland. At least I am. Mm-hmm. And Detective Williams here is from D.C. And we just wanted to talk to you just about some things, way back in the day, things like that. So did you ever live in Maryland? How long have you been down here in South Carolina?
I've been here almost a year now.
Almost a year. Okay. Where'd you live prior to that?
In Frederick County.
In Frederick. Okay. All right. How about, where were you? Are you from Frederick County?
I'm actually from Oxon Hill.
Okay. Oxon Hill. All right.
Oxon Hill.
The interview is taking place in Warrick's living room. Detective Todd Williams is sitting on a love seat next to Warrick, and the other two detectives, Allison DePoy and Horry County Detective Brian Scales, are sitting together on a nearby couch. Detectives spend a few minutes asking Warrick about where he grew up and where he's lived since the early 90s. They want to know where he worked and whether that work took him into Georgetown and other parts of Washington, D.C. Warrick tells them he worked at Utility Systems, installing electric cables underground, and that he also had a landscaping business in the 90s. Then the conversation shifts. You'll hear some rustling on the audio. The recording was done secretly. South Carolina is a one-party consent state, meaning Giles Warrick didn't know he was being recorded.
So I guess just explaining a little bit how we got here and why we want to talk to you, okay? So we had a series of incidents back in the 90s, okay? We had some sexual assaults back in the 90s, and what we do is we take whatever DNA may have been in the case, and it's been cold, right? We had no more leads, we had nothing. So we've used a technique that's kind of like forensic genealogy. And we've come to a bunch of people that may fit in where we need them to fit in this family tree, okay? And when I say a bunch, it's a bunch, okay? So we're talking to a lot of people, and we're here to just talk to everybody that may or may not fit. We have to narrow down, right? So
what we're trying to do is just eliminate people.
That's D.C. Detective Todd Williams.
And so the easiest way to eliminate people is we have DNA. It's just to take a sample from whoever we talk to. We test it against what we have. It takes a couple 6-8 weeks, and then we'll know one way or another. Okay. And it's easy just to eliminate. If you're willing to give us a sample, it's just a Q-tip. We put it in a box. We send it in. It takes like a couple months. We'll call you. We'll eliminate you, and then we just move on about our business. Okay. If you're willing to give it to us, we can just do it, and we'll be out of your hair.
Yeah, I have no choice.
Okay.
Warrick says, "I have no choice." This is a crucial part of the tape. Warrick's defense attorney has argued to the court that it shows coercion. Listen closely. Here's the rest of the exchange.
So it's a Q-tip. I'm going to go one cheek, the other cheek, and Detective Scales is going to do it just because we're in his jurisdiction. Okay. So it's like we just have to cover all of our bases.
The detectives don't immediately respond to Warrick saying he has no choice. Instead, Detective DuPois explains how the swab is going to work and says another detective with Horry County is going to take one too, since it's his jurisdiction.
Can you give us a good number to call you?
The audio gets a little muffled here. That's Detective Williams asking for Warrick's phone number so he can call him with the results. And then Detective Williams says this.
When you said you do have a choice, I don't want you to feel like we're holding you down doing it. If you're volunteering, it's the easiest way to do it. But I'm not, I don't want you to make it seem like we're twisting your arm. We just, if you're willing to do it, we appreciate it, and so it's the easiest way to do it. So,
Mr. Warrick, can you spell your first name for me?
Giles, Giles.
Okay, and your middle name?
Daniel, Daniel.
And Warrick?
Yes.
As the investigators prepare to swab Warrick's cheek, they engage in small talk.
We'll get out of your hair.
Just dressed and just starting to get hot in here.
I got you.
It's going to be cold this week, I think. Right? Cold snap you guys are getting? I think we're getting it up north, too. But
Tomorrow morning's supposed to be freezing. Well, our version of freezing. I don't know about y'all's.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this one out. I'm like, wait a minute here.
Give it a few years.
This is not cold.
It'll get cold in a few years.
Well, that's part of the point of moving down here. So is the weather, right?
Well, I'm 60 years old.
Yeah.
Need to slow down.
I'm just going to swab the inside of both sides of your cheek.
Then the detective from Horry County.
That's it. And then she's going to do one as well.
the time.
That's 48.
6:48. What's the date today? Where are I don't even know what day it is.
The 12th.
Thank you.
After they swab Warrick's cheek, the detectives continue to ask a few more questions. They ask about his family. Remember, investigators knew from the work of Officer Steve Smugareski that the unknown subject they were looking for was the son of a man named Daniel Parker Swan. Detective Williams was curious whether Warrick could tell him who his father was.
So you said your mom's still alive and your dad had passed?
I've never met my dad.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Did your mom never told you who your dad was, or you know who he is? Or?
When you're younger, they tell you hear these stories, but then after you get older, it's something you never had.
The audio gets hard to hear. There's some shuffling of papers. Warrick says he heard stories about who his dad was when he was younger, but he says you can't miss something you never had. The investigators ask a few more questions about where he lived in Montgomery County and about his family. The interview is winding down.
You got any
questions for us?
No. So we got your phone number.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said, it's probably going to take 6-8 weeks. Once we know what we got,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll give you a call.
Okay.
And just as a courtesy to let you know what the results are, because what we do with everybody. So,
Okay.
but just expect a call and at some point, and it'll either be her number or a 202 number, and we'll just let you know what's going on.
Okay.
I'm going to leave you my card.
Yeah, can I write my number on the back of it too?
I'm sorry.
I don't have to do it for you.
According to the full tape, the whole visit lasted no more than 24 minutes. At the end, you heard Detective Williams say it was probably going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get results. But as we told you in episode 6, Officer Smugareski and another officer were already in Conway, waiting to rush that sample back to the lab in Montgomery County. Now, just weeks before the trial begins, I can tell you who won the argument on the DNA. On November 4th, I was the only person in the courtroom gallery when Judge Milton Lee issued his ruling. It was just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and everyone in the courtroom was wearing a mask, including the judge. Giles Warrick was sitting next to his attorney, dressed in a jail-issued orange jumpsuit. And as he began to explain his decision, Judge Lee sat back in his chair and put his hands together. To me, it appeared he wasn't relying on any notes as he told Warrick's attorney, Stephen Mercer, that he was convinced the detectives had not coerced Warrick into giving up his DNA. From the recorded interview, Judge Lee said it was clear Warrick had done it voluntarily. In particular, he said Detective Williams had clearly told Warrick he had a choice. Judge Lee also said Warrick was not in custody at the time, and the detectives were under no obligation to tell him they were also investigating the murder of Christine Mirzayan. What I find extraordinary about this tape is that Giles Warrick never seems surprised by the detectives' visit. He doesn't immediately demand to know what they're doing at his door so early in the morning. And when they tell him they were investigating a string of sexual assaults, he seemingly has no reaction. And at the end of the interview, when the cops ask him if he has any questions, he says no. It's almost as if it's a visit he's been expecting for years. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, WTOP American Nightmare listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News & World Report, a third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. And it costs less than $1 a day, half the price of ADT's traditional, professionally installed system. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/nightmare today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/nightmare. There's no safe like Simply Safe. You already know what happened after detectives got the DNA sample at Warrick's house in South Carolina. But thanks to hundreds of pages of court filings, now we also know exactly how the arrest went down, what police found when they searched Warrick's house, and what he told detectives DuPois and Williams when he came face to face with them again, this time handcuffed in a police interview room in Horry County, South Carolina. Here's some of what I learned. By midnight of the day police first interviewed Warrick, the DNA evidence that had been rushed to Montgomery County had come back a match. An arrest warrant was written up. But detectives also needed another warrant, a search warrant for Warrick's house, and at 1:15 a.m. woke up a judge in Conway for his signature. For hours, ever since Smuggs and another officer left with the swabs, Warrick and the house on Oak Log Lake Road had been under covert surveillance. At around 2 o'clock in the morning, not long after the judge signed off on the arrest warrant, one of the officers keeping an eye on the house noticed a light come on. Then they saw a man come out of the house carrying something in his hand and walking toward a tan pickup parked in the driveway. The man went into the driver's side door for a few minutes, but then he went back into the house. Now, I've learned that after police got the warrant, they had planned to arrest Warrick at around 6 o'clock the following morning, at around the time they knew he usually left for landscaping jobs. But the fact that he was up and about in the middle of the night caused police to rethink their plans to move up the arrest. Police from Horry County sprang into action, returning to the house in Conway with their blue lights flashing. It's now about 20 hours after the detectives first knocked on Warrick's door. Police surround his house on Oak Log Lane. From near the front door, one of the detectives sees Warrick inside the house, in the kitchen, reaching into the cabinet above the oven. Detectives knocked and announced themselves. Now, it's unclear if police forced their way inside or if Warrick opened the door for them. He seemed to be right at the door when police made entry. Maybe he was getting ready to leave. Then there's some kind of a scuffle. One of the officers takes Warrick to the ground. Some glass figurines by the door get knocked over during the arrest. Warrick is in handcuffs and taken outside. Then the search begins. 3 detectives and 2 sergeants go through the house with a sergeant from D.C. telling the others what they're looking for. In the kitchen, the officers say they found a Washington Post newspaper dated 1998, as well as a separate newspaper article from the same year. We don't know the specific date of the paper or what articles it contained, but 1998 was the year Christine was killed. They also found that letter I've already told you about, the letter Giles Warrick wrote to his fiancée. It was found tucked between 2 boxes of freezer bags inside a cabinet. During Warrick's preliminary hearing, Detective Williams read parts of it from the stand, but I'd never seen the whole thing, and I've always wondered what it said. I found it buried in one of the documents filed in the case last spring. Remember, this is what Warrick wrote to his fiancée just moments before he was arrested. It reads in full. I am so sorry things ended this way. I left you in a mess, money and house, but I never meant for this to happen. All I wanted to do is love you, marry you, and be happy. Please forgive me. Please, you are my love, and it's been that way since the day we met. Please don't cry and take care of yourself. All my junk is yours. Please sell it to help pay something. I know it's not enough, but there's nothing that I can do. Love you so much. All the titles have been signed, so a couple of grand is better than nothing. Missing you. All the mess you are about to go through, I hope you don't hate me. Love you. Meanwhile, Giles Warrick has been taken to a nearby police station where detectives Allison DuPuy and Todd Williams are waiting. At this point, it's a little after 3 a.m.
All right, man.
Giles,
Yes,
are you right-handed or left-handed?
right hand.
Okay, well, we'll get through this. Obviously, you know who we are from this morning.
This recording comes from an interview with police after Warrick was arrested that night, when he came face-to-face with Williams and DuPuy again, this time handcuffed in a police interview room in Horry County, South Carolina.
We want to continue to talk to you a little bit more in depth about what we were talking about this morning.
That's Detective Williams.
At this point, you obviously realize that you're under arrest. And before we go into stuff and talk to you, we have to read you your rights. And we hope that you want to talk to us because we kind of want to get through this thing and kind of explain what's going on. Maybe there's some stuff you can talk to us about. But just so we, so you know that, you are under arrest, and I'm going to read you your rights.
Yes.
And then we'll go from there, okay? You are under arrest. Before we ask you any questions, you must understand what your rights are.
Detective Williams reads him his rights. It's a long list.
Do you wish to answer any questions?
I need to know what is going on.
And that's what we're going to explain everything to you. And so if you're willing to talk to us, we're going to lay it all out for you. And so you just have to be willing to talk to us. So
Okay.
if you at any point, if you decide you don't want to talk to us, that's cool. We'll stop and, we'll go about our business. We want to be able to explain this to you. So
Okay.
Are you willing to answer any questions without having an attorney present, yes or no? If you can just do me a favor and sign right there. You have the time, Allie.
Yep. 3:05 on the 13th.
That's 3:05 in the morning, or 21 hours after they first knocked on his door.
And again, if you don't remember my name from earlier, my name's Todd Williams, and this is Allison DuPuy. We're the detectives who came and spoke to you this morning. Understand with the nature of the circumstances. I hope you can understand that, like what we told you about it might take some time, 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, was, we expected to get the results from the DNA test a little bit quicker, but we didn't know what kind of mind frame you were going to be in, so we just wanted to, we just kind of wanted to leave it kind of low key like we did, and so that you wouldn't be, if it did come back as a match, which obviously we're back here and you're under arrest now.
Warrick tells the detectives he was not trying to escape when he was leaving the house that night. Instead, he says he needed to go to Frederick, Maryland for a worker comp claim he had made. Detective Williams seems surprised and mentions the letter they had found in the house, the one addressed to his fiancée.
I mean, you don't mention anything like that. It seems like it was a surprise that you were leaving just kind of abruptly, and honestly, this whole thing, we want to, understand what's going on, and we want to, if possible, save your family, your, her, everybody, embarrassment and the hardship that they're going to go through behind this, and we're willing to do whatever we can do. We're hoping that you're willing to talk to us about what was going on back then and why maybe some of these things were happening. But the reality of this case is that it's there's DNA that links all the cases together that we're talking about, and
My DNA with
Yeah.
all of this.
yeah,
Yes.
Wow.
yeah, and so. Like I said, it's this is going to be a very hard road for you. It's going to be a difficult time for your family.
Then the two start asking about Warrick's family again, specifically his father. The 60-year-old again tells the detectives he never knew his father and was never curious about who he was. The questioning appears to be important to the detectives, since the familial link, according to an affidavit in the case, came from Warrick's father, Daniel Parker Swan, a married man who apparently had an affair with Warrick's mother. Warrick says he heard rumors growing up from kids in the neighborhood about who his dad was, but he said he never knew for certain. That would mean the detectives using forensic genealogy to build the family tree that would eventually find the accused Potomac River rapist may have known more about his own background than he did. The irony is striking. The two detectives then asked Warrick whether he followed news coverage back in the 90s of what police were then calling the North Potomac rapist. Warrick said he had not. He also denied knowing anything about the 1998 murder of Christine Mirzayan and said he hadn't heard about it on the news. Detective DuPoy then asked Warrick how his DNA came to be at so many crime scenes.
So, like Detective Williams was saying, we have these cases, and I'm just going to kind of briefly explain what the Montgomery County cases were and why we know that we have your DNA, okay? These are cases that a person broke into a residence, okay, when a woman was home and sexually assaulted her. And that's where we're getting this DNA, okay? We're not getting it from outside. We're not getting it from a car door. We're not getting it from anything like that. So it's very clear to us where we found this DNA that is linked to you, okay? Like it's not really up for discussion. It is what it is, okay? But these are cases that really have affected people, especially women in Montgomery County, and it's like this is why we do this. And I think looking at that letter that you wrote, I mean, you clearly love your fiance. I know you've got kids, and I can see that you're a different person than you were probably back then. I mean, I didn't know you back then. But these things that happened back then doesn't seem to me the same guy that I'm looking at right now and the person that wrote that letter. So we're sitting here and we're trying to find some way, some reason to say, okay, he did these awful things, but, he was going through a terrible time, or there's something in your past that prompted this, and maybe something has changed since then. You've gotten a hold of it. And it's part of that, everybody has that. We need to know why. And I think, right now you're sitting here, and I'm sure a lot's going through your head. But this is why we want to sit down and talk with you, because we may not have another chance. Okay? And this is what we're here for. This is why we came down to South Carolina for it. Okay? So I don't know if there's any one particular incident that you remember that you can talk about.
No, I didn't do this. I'm not going to sit there and say I did this. No, I didn't.
Is there? How are we going to explain that your DNA is?
I have no idea.
I get it. There was one scene there. Maybe there's some happenstance that would explain it, but it's a lot of scenes. It's Montgomery County had, I think there was like six or eight cases or something. In D.C. we had 2 cases, and ultimately it ended with something bad happening to the final woman, like she was killed.
Detective Williams then seems to shift tactics, taking more of a sympathetic tone. He mentions how this is going to impact his family. He mentions the letter Warrick left for his fiancée. You're essentially saying, I'm sorry for what you're about to go through, Detective Williams says. It sounds like you knew this was about to happen. Williams sticks with the sympathetic good cop tone. He tells Warrick they want to understand what he was going through back in the day. You're obviously a different person now. Maybe what happened in D.C. was a little bit out of character. But 27 minutes into the interview, Warrick is giving up nothing and maintains his innocence.
I've talked to a lot of people. She's talked to a lot of people. And it's the hardest thing for people to do is to get over the hump of accepting and acknowledging what things they might have done that were wrong. And really most of this is about people judging them and whether they're bad or good, or this is about things that you did in your life that were bad things. But is this the person you're going to be defined as, or is there an explanation that you can tell us about? And you're the only person who knows your mind. And that.
Well, I didn't do this, so I'm not guilty on any of this stuff.
So how can you explain your DNA?
I have no idea.
The detectives keep probing, more specifically about the murder of Christine.
Did you know Christine Mirjan? Do you know the name?
I have no idea who you're talking about.
She was the woman that is the murder that I'm dealing with in D.C. She was a woman that was walking home in Georgetown, and she was abducted, not really abducted, but was taken off the sidewalk, and she was sexually assaulted, and she was killed during the sexual assault. And you know whose DNA came back on that? You. And so you don't know Christine? You didn't meet her at a party? You didn't have consensual sex with her?
I don't know Christine. I have no idea.
In 1998, August 1st, 98, were you ever in Georgetown at a party or anywhere and ran into Christine Mirjan and had a sexual encounter with her, a consensual sexual encounter, and then went about your business?
I've never been to a party in D.C.
Did you ever run into a girl named Christine, or did you ever run into a girl in August of 98 that you had a consensual sexual encounter with and then went about your business?
No, because in 1998 I was sleeping with one person, and that was my kid's mother.
That was Alita.
Yeah.
Then this exchange. It comes more than an hour into the interview. Detective Williams starts talking about Giles Warrick's family again, the difficult position they're going to be in.
You honestly could change the course of this for everyone in your family. If you sat in here and took responsibility for the things you did, then we wouldn't have to go talk to any of them. You know what? Yeah, I did some fucked up things in my life, and I regret it. And I'm a different man at 60. And now I don't want my family to have to do this. They're going to suffer through this with me. And that's like honestly, this happened. Now you got to do something to be a bigger man than this for them. And I'm not BSing about this, man.
I understand that, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I did something I didn't do it.
Well, explain your DNA on 10 cases, man.
I don't know.
Right. You can't explain it because your DNA is on 10 cases. And like I said, dude, there's a lot of people who do bad stuff in life. You did some bad stuff. There's no getting around it. You did some bad stuff. And maybe whatever happened in 98 with that woman in Georgetown was an anomaly, obviously, because she's dead and the rest of the women are alive. But so what happened that night that caused you to do what you did? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's.
Can I have an attorney with this, because this is like I didn't do this, so.
You're certainly entitled to an attorney, and if you decide you want to stop, we're going to stop the interview at any point.
Yeah.
Just think about what we're saying, okay?
Okay.
You need some water or anything?
No, thank you.
Okay.
The interview is over. Now, before I go any further in this story, I have to tell you that the jury will not be seeing that letter Warrick left for his fiancée. Judge Lee threw it out the same day he ruled the DNA was lawfully obtained. Defense attorney Stephen Mercer had argued that the search warrant giving police the authority to search Warrick's home that morning was overly broad, and anything taken from the house that day should be suppressed. Judge Milton Lee agreed, saying the detectives should have been more specific about what they were looking for. If they thought there might be evidence Warrick planned to hit the road and leave behind the life he had built with his fiancée, they should have said so. In addition, the judge said if they were looking for evidence tying Warrick to the Washington area, they should have included it in the warrant. Now, since there are other references to the letter, specifically in the interview with Warrick after his arrest, we will have to see if that makes it into evidence at trial. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. You know, therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. I went for help recently when a traumatic event from my childhood came back to haunt me, and it was very helpful to sit and talk it all out with a licensed therapist. Everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/American Nightmare. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/American Nightmare. Hi, it's Paul Wagner. In my career, I've investigated a lot of crimes and shined a light on how people can keep themselves safe. And here at WTOP's American Nightmare podcast series, there's one crime we don't talk about enough, and that's how some home security companies charge you an insane amount every month. It's highway robbery. Simply Safe Home Security is different. They keep you safe and help you save. In fact, right now, our listeners can get 40% off Simply Safe's advanced security system. Because at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters.
Those big wireless companies try to lure you in with a new phone just to lock you into a contract. Not Simple Mobile. If you have a great smartphone you love, you can get a powerful nationwide 5G network without the contract. Just text the word BYOP to 611-611 to see if your phone's compatible. Simple Mobile. Out with the old, in with the simple. Message and data rates may apply. Visit simplemobile.com/privacy policy for privacy policy and the terms and conditions at simplemobile.com/terms and conditions. Compatible 5G capable device and SIM required. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary. 5G network not available in all areas. 5G upload speeds not yet available.
On September 9th, 2021, nearly 2 years after he was arrested in South Carolina, Giles Warrick was indicted for first-degree premeditated murder while armed. About 2 weeks later, he was arraigned in D.C. Superior Court where he pleaded not guilty. I watched the proceedings that day from my computer. COVID-19 was still wreaking havoc on the court system, and the judge had limited the number of people who could attend. The camera never zoomed in on Warrick, and I could not get a good look at him. By then, he'd been in the D.C. jail for nearly 2 years. In the years since the indictment, there's been a flurry of court filings in anticipation of the trial. The date has been set for November 29th. If you're listening to this podcast the day it's been posted, that's exactly 2 weeks from today. The court filings provide clues about what evidence will come into play in the trial. I've already told you about the fight over the DNA swab. It's also expected that prosecutors in D.C. will bring in evidence from all of those rapes in Montgomery County, Maryland, even though Warrick has yet to go to trial on any of those charges. I'm also curious about how genetic genealogy will play out in the courtroom. It's been used in plenty of other trials across the country, but to my knowledge, this will be one of the first cases in D.C. That brings me back to Warrick's attorney, Stephen Mercer, who filed that motion seeking to have the DNA evidence against Warrick tossed out. Mercer is based out of Rockville, Maryland, and he specializes in DNA evidence. I've twice asked Mercer for an interview, but he's declined. A biography on his law firm's website says, from 2010 to 2017, Mercer was the chief attorney of the Forensics Division of the Maryland Office of the Public Defender, nationally recognized as a model of excellence in forensic science litigation. The biography goes on to say, quote, Steve is passionate about the particular issues related to DNA mixtures, touch DNA, the continued expansion of law enforcement DNA databanks, and emerging law enforcement techniques such as using the similarities of DNA between related persons to identify family members of individuals in a DNA databank. The firm's website also contains clips from newspaper articles and TV shows where Mercer has given his opinion on DNA. One of the clips is from NBC News in a segment called Think, where Mercer looked into the camera and gave his opinion in a piece that lasted just over 2 minutes. During the trial, now scheduled for November of 2022, it is entirely possible the defense will bring up the issue of forensic genealogy. We don't yet know for certain, since Warrick's attorney has not tipped his hand on how he will mount a defense. In court during the preliminary hearing in February of 2020, Detective Todd Williams testified the DNA that ultimately led investigators to Warrick came from a cousin who had entered it into an ancestry database. John Fitzgerald is a former commander with the Montgomery County Police. He retired after serving as the chief's chief of staff. He's now in charge of the tiny police force in the village of Chevy Chase, Maryland. I recently sat down with Chief Fitzgerald after learning he was an expert in the way forensic genealogy is being used in the state of Maryland, which is where Warrick will be tried for the rapes he's accused of committing. He told me he became a champion of the investigative technique after learning a state senator wanted to ban it. After months of negotiation and lobbying with proponents and opponents, he and others managed to convince lawmakers in Annapolis that forensic genealogy can be used responsibly and ethically by detectives hoping to find suspects in violent crimes. It's now law in Maryland detectives must first notify a judge before searching ancestry databases.
A genealogy investigation, the word genealogy just means figuring out who's related to who. It's building a family tree. So a genealogy investigation or a genealogy hobby can involve finding out who your ancestors are and how far away they live and who you're related to and what their history is. So there's a lot of hobbyists that do this. It's not a new thing. Genealogy is using simply public records like marriage records, birth records, death records, to sort through the history of a family and who's related to who. So who's the mother? Who's the grandmother? Who's the cousin? Who's the child? Well, in a criminal investigation, sometimes we have DNA from crime scenes, from blood or other bodily fluids that have DNA. And sometimes that DNA tells us exactly who the bad guy is because that guy's DNA is already in some database somewhere. Well, that doesn't always work out so neatly. So when we can't find the murderer who left his blood on the scene through a DNA check, what that sometimes requires that we do is taking that blood and seeing if we can find a relative of the murderer. Let's suppose it's a second cousin. And that second cousin from California has placed her own DNA voluntarily in a database to find her own relatives. And she has agreed to allow the police to take a look at it. So the police will take the bad guy's DNA, and we only ever have any control over DNA that came from a crime scene. We don't see anybody else's DNA. So that DNA is made into a file, so an electronic file, so it can look at other similar electronic files. And if we find that the closest relative of this person who voluntarily allowed her DNA to be sort of matched, we say, we never get her DNA. What we get as a response is Sally McGillicuddy from Irvine, California, and my phone number is 555-1212. That's what we get. We never get Sally's DNA. We never figure out if Sally is tall or short, or has blonde hair, or has a propensity for any disease. We never have any of that information, nor do we care. We just want to know who she is and how closely related she is to our suspect
It's
murderer.
a lead.
It's a lead. It's a lead, exactly. And so from there, we just use public records to build a family tree, starting with Sally McGillicuddy. And we figure out who her ancestors are. And then skilled family tree builders, they call them genetic genealogists, but just they're family tree builders. They use their laptop computer and they sort through records that are publicly available. And then they find the common ancestor between Sally McGillicuddy, an innocent third cousin or whatever, and the perpetrator. They build a family tree upwards and then back downwards until they can say, oh, look, here is our suspect or suspects. Maybe it's two brothers. And from there, the investigation is narrowed. And then police do normal police work to investigate the one or two suspects that this lead has given them. So for those who get anxious when somebody says, oh, your DNA was used, we have no access to and no interest in any information DNA may hold outside of identifying the bad person who did a bad thing.
On a winter night in a small community near Denver, Colorado, Jim Matthews arrived home late. He expected to find his 12-year-old daughter, who'd been dropped off after a Christmas concert, but when he called out, "Hi, Janelle," the house was eerily quiet. His daughter's shoes were on the floor, but she was gone, and it would be 35 years before she would be found. Dead. After the discovery of Janelle Matthews' body in 2019, the police turned their attention to a man who had told law enforcement years ago that he knew something, but they dismissed him. The man did seem obsessed with the case, but is that all he was? A true crime fanatic or a killer? Now a jury will decide if Janelle's murderer was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Wondery and Campside Media's podcast Suspect is back for a second season with a story that attempts to separate one man's true crime obsession from a motive for murder. Hey, Prime members, listen to the Amazon Music exclusive podcast Suspect, Vanished in the Snow, in the Amazon Music app. Download the app today. Hi, it's Paul Wagner. In my career, I've investigated a lot of crimes and shined a light on how people can keep themselves safe. And here at WTOP's American Nightmare podcast series, there's one crime we don't talk about enough, and that's how some home security companies charge you an insane amount every month. It's highway robbery. Simply Safe Home Security is different. They keep you safe and help you save. In fact, right now, our listeners can get 40% off Simply Safe's advanced security system. Because at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is here.
Roger that.
And so is Mountain Dew.
Roger that.
Unlock in-game rewards like only Dew can.
Wait, what rewards?
A Dew Operator skin.
Man, I love Operator skins.
Dual double XP.
Dual double XP? Dual double XP.
Even Call of Duty points.
You're kidding me. Call of Duty points? This is incredible. I can't believe it.
Soldier, get a hold of yourself.
Oh. Roger that.
Look for specially marked packaging and visit MountainDewGaming.com for details and restrictions. Open to U.S. residents 17+. Call of Duty points available only on 12 and 24 packs. Ends 3/28/23.
In the summer of 2021, I went down to the criminal clerk's office at D.C. Superior Court and downloaded the case file. It didn't take too long. There wasn't much there at the time. The most intriguing documents are what's called discovery letters. filed by the prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Discovery is a legal term used in court and covers everything the government is expected to turn over to the defense. The letters give reporters like me just a little bit of insight into what's going on with the case as it heads toward trial. For example, in one letter, there's a line that says, Utility Systems Subpoena Response. Utility Systems is where Warrick worked beginning in 1997 or 98. Another line says grand jury transcripts from VD. VD are the initials investigators have used to identify the woman raped on MacArthur Boulevard in the district. The letter also says it was turning over to the defense grand jury transcripts from witnesses 1 through 40. On June 18, 2021, prosecutors filed another discovery letter. This one is 10 pages long and lists what appears to be everything that was done to solve the murder of Christine and the rape of VD. For example, the letter says it was turning over to the defense a Georgetown University memo dated 6/2/1998 regarding harassing calls made to the library. Another line lists, quote, broadcast from Alexandria, possible rape bag recovered on 8/14/1998. About 2 weeks after Christine was killed. On page 9, there are a few other intriguing entries. One says, 3/23/1991, report of burglary for Kettler Brothers Incorporated. The suspect is Warrick. And then the letter lists a text conversation with Witness 11. Witness 11 appears to be a woman who knows Warrick very well. The document says on November 18, 2019, 6 days after the arrest, Witness 11 corresponded with Detective Williams. During the text conversation, Witness 11 said, "You have me worried. I don't know anything, and I don't believe he did these things. You got it wrong. I already see big problems with your case, and I am an amateur. The Washington Post contacted me. I'm confused and scared and don't know who I can trust. You guys already told the media before he's been charged. Someone is manipulating this case, but you don't want to tell me? Who told the media?" When Witness 11 was told that the detective was not going to discuss the details, Witness 11 stated, "Then I will probably talk to the media." 2 days later, the document says Witness 11 texted the detective again asking, "Can you run some records for me? I am trying to get some dates verified. Can I ask that of you?" The detective asked what Witness 11 was trying to verify, and Witness 11 responded, "He was in jail several times around my pregnancies, so I'm trying to trace things in my head. I called one detention center, and records are too old." The detective we're talking about is Todd Williams, who then told Witness 11 it would be discussed when she came in for the interview, to which she replied, "But if you don't have them already, you aren't going to help me. I'm going through all the stages of grief is the only way to explain it." In a text message exchange with me, Alita, the mother of 3 of Giles Warrick's children, confirmed she is Witness 11. She did not go to the media as she claimed. She's never spoken publicly about the case and would not give me an interview. In the same document, Warrick's fiancée, the woman he was living with in South Carolina, told police that after the arrest, 2 relatives of Warrick's pointed a finger at a cousin and said the man resembled the composite sketch of the Potomac River rapist. Police looked into the claim and ruled the man out. Police also asked her if any relative had offered up an alibi for any of the crimes Warrick is accused of, and she replied, "I mean, just the fact that children were being born, but no, I mean, nobody's saying, he was here at a birthday party for my 12-year-old son. There's nothing definitive like that." She was then asked about that letter found inside her home the day Warrick was arrested. The letter the judge in the case called a consciousness of guilt. She told police she believed Warrick had an upcoming workman's compensation appointment in Maryland, but did not believe he was heading there the morning of his arrest. The discovery letters are full of tantalizing bits of information like that. As the case got closer to trial, the prosecutors were releasing more and more evidence about the case. Most of it you now know. As I wrote this episode, I remembered a moment in my interview with David that I wanted to share with you. It came right at the end of the second time we talked. I was thanking him for the time, and he was telling me about his thriving career as a scientist and life on the West Coast. His wife, Lauren, was standing in the background. She's a bit off mic, and so some of what she says is hard to understand. What's crystal clear, though, is the emotion in her voice. You got a busy life. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you very much for talking, David.
Sure.
And I
question or request, actually.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I appreciate it too, that's really hard to talk about, that there's justice for her. And we talked about going to Washington, D.C. to stand for her because her family's from Vancouver and someone needs to be there for her.
It's true.
I listened to the whole thing, and then as soon as I asked you a question, I was like, oh no, I'm crying. Because I know there are things all around our house that are from Christine.
Yeah.
The plates we eat dinner on every night, and this or that, or a piece of furniture or whatever, and photo albums of their wedding, and that's something I think about a lot, and that we've talked about a lot. We talked about a lot when we first met.
Yeah.
Fragility of life, and
That's right.
not taking anything for granted, but it was a pretty emotional time. It was almost a year. It was like 11 months ago, right? We found out in the middle of November, and they called my cell phone too, and I knew right away some movement on the case. This DC phone number came in, and I was like, uh-oh. Because they called him next, and they were on a schedule to talk to him before they were going to break the news.
Right.
But I feel strongly that she needs her day in court.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can do that on her behalf.
I hadn't thought about it until Lauren mentioned it, that maybe there wouldn't be anyone in the courtroom to represent Christine. She was only in D.C. for that one summer, 1998, and her family doesn't have any ties in the area, and now they live in Canada. David and Lauren want to make sure there's someone who remembers Christine in the courtroom in D.C. when her accused killer goes on trial. This is a case that's been in my head now for 24 years, and almost daily for the last 2 years as I conducted interviews and wrote this podcast. The trial is now set for the end of November in D.C. Superior Court. A case like this will likely go on for weeks with testimony from the medical examiner, detectives, and DNA experts. Christine was a scientist, and it's not lost on me that major advances in science, notably DNA technology, eventually led to an arrest in the case. At the end of the day, the case was solved in a lab, a place Christine spent a great deal of her academic career. The National Academy's fellowship program Christine never got a chance to finish is now named in her honor. It's considered one of the most prestigious fellowships for recent science graduates. Each year, the Christine Mirzayan Science and Technology Fellowship brings young scientists to Washington, D.C. for a 12-week hands-on program to learn about science and technology policy and the role that scientists and engineers play in advising the nation. It's the kind of thing Christine was passionate about, something she may have made her life's work if she hadn't been murdered in August of 1998. In my interview with David, he reflected on the life of a woman he loved and admired. She was, he says, something else.
She was a really unusual, interesting person in terms of her personality. She was very passionate. She lived life with the highest level of passion. And she kind of had this attitude like you have to live life to its fullest every day. And she believed in this philosopher, Albert Camus, a famous French philosopher who had a philosophy that, life is meaningless and you might as well just kill yourself because life is meaningless. But the only reason to live is because you have a passion for life, that life itself is meaningless, but it's still amazing, right? Something, kind of like that type of, and she really lived by that kind of philosophy. Mm-hmm. She was very outgoing, I would say, very smart, very brilliant, no doubt about it. She was filled with life. Amazingly filled with life compared to the average person, I would say. And one of the things I talked about at her eulogy was that she was also, part of her passion was to sometimes do things that were kind of dangerous. Like I remember the story where we went on, she had a friend who was also kind of shared her personality in the Bay Area, Mario. And we all went on this rafting trip once, and Mario just basically bought a raft, a blow up raft at Target or something like that. And then we went to this river, and I was like, "Are we sure this is safe?" We put the raft in, and we just started going down the river, and I was like really nervous, but Christine was kind of like, "You wimp, this is we have to live life to its fullest. We're living life to its fullest right now." And then we passed some people that were on the side of the river, and they said, "Oh, by the way, watch out for the waterfall."
Oh boy!
So I was like, "Oh, that doesn't sound good." But yeah, she had that personality. She was. She definitely lived life to its fullest. So it was really, really just so sad that her life ended the way it did in this kind of meaningless way.
Now, keep in mind, the trial starts at the end of November, and we will be covering it. So future episodes will be coming in early December as we follow this incredible story to the end. Season 3 of WTOP's American Nightmare series has been written by me, Paul Wagner, with editorial assistance from Jack Moore, Julia Ziegler, and Craig Schwab. This series would not have been possible without the help of Dean Comby, Joe Madano, Kelly, David Hackos, Brad Garrett, Gary Gill, Darcy Spencer, John Fitzgerald, David Gillespie, Jeff Stauffer, and Steve Smugareski. Reporting and production of this podcast was supported by a grant from Spotlight DC, Capital City Fund for Investigative Journalism. For grants, please apply to spotlightdc.org. Our show relies on people like you leaving ratings and reviews on Apple to help us climb the podcast charts and attract new listeners. We hope if you like what you hear, you will take a minute to do so. If you have questions or comments about the show, send us an email through our website, AmericanNightmarePodcast.com. We are also on Twitter and Facebook at AM Nightmare Pod. The music in the show is Ethereal Thoughts by Olive Musique and Steadfast by Moments. And as always, thanks for listening.